The difference between a 3D animation whose movement is well timed out versus an animation whose timing is visibly off almost always boils down to the position and spacing of its keyframes. Those little markers along the timeline that control pretty much the way that everything in the scene changes. From an object's position, to the color of a light, to the amount of time it takes for an explosion to blow something up. Adjusting keyframes after the fact is just part of the production process. You'll do it on every project you take on. The reason all boils down to timing. If the timing is off on something, it typically sticks out like a sore thumb. The fix? Going into the keyframes and making a few adjustments. When you're looking for the most comprehensive and complete way of editing one or more keys, you're going to find that there's only so much that you can do down at the bottom of the timeline. The utmost control that 3ds Max can offer for managing keys is a part of the program called the Track View. It actually consists of two methods of keyframe management, one called the Dope Sheet, the other known as the Curve Editor. In this video, we'll be looking specifically at the Dope Sheet. We'll do that using a file named Dope Sheet. You can find it in the Working Files folder for this chapter. Let's begin by first playing back the timeline so we can see what we're working with. Okay, with all the various things going on, it's obvious that we've got a handful of things in the tube that have been animated. Transformations, we've got a taper modifier, even a few wardrobe changes with the material working its way through a series of colors. Let's go ahead and select the tube so we can see its keyframes down on the timeline. As you can see, there's quite a bit of stuff to manage. Keys of different colors, spacing between this and that, it's really all over the board. In order to best get a handle on what we're dealing with all those keys, our efforts will much better be served by opening up and using Max's Dope Sheet. Now, there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. One is going to the Graph Editor's pull-down menu and choosing Dope Sheet. The other is to simply right-click on the screen, then when the menu opens, choosing Dope Sheet. Either way you go, you'll get the same results, the Dope Sheet dialog opening up on the screen. To get a better look at what we're dealing with, let's go ahead and pull down the dialog to the lower part of the screen. The Dope Sheet works kind of like a spreadsheet, in that it displays and allows you to manage anything and everything that's been animated in your scene. So it's kind of a one-stop shop, capable of listing all of your objects and everything on those objects that has been or could be animated. And the Dope Sheet can be used for all sorts of things. Moving keys, adjusting values, even being able to control blocks of keys when maybe entire sections of an animation need to be pushed forward or pulled back. Heck, you could even use it to add sound to an animation for things like character dialogue or throwing a thunderous explosion in with a special effect. Believe me, the more you use it, the more you'll realize just how important it is to your everyday workflow. Let's open up the settings on the tube by clicking on the plus sign next to its name. Why don't we also zoom into a smaller, more confined area so we can take a closer look? Down at the bottom of the dialog on the right-hand side, you have a series of navigation commands. Using the zoom region, I'm going to window an area between frame 0 and frame 90. Now you can see those numbers along the ruler at the bottom of the dialog. The colored markings that you see are the keyframes that have been created for the tube. See the track on the left called Transform? Let's go ahead and expand that, clicking on the plus sign. There's your three tube transformations: Move, Rotate, and Scaled, each of those sets of keys being color-coded. The red markers represent the move keys on the tube. The green squares are for the rotation keys, and the blue keys that you see are for the tube scaling. Any key can be selected by simply clicking directly on it. When it selects, it'll turn white. The tracks can be even further expanded. Click on the plus sign to the left of Position. Let's also open up our Rotate track. So there you go, your X, Y, and Z channels for each. Just below that, let's open up the Modified Object entry. Under Modified Object, you'll find the keys for any modifiers that have been added to and animated on the object, and anything that might have been animated as far as the tube's original creation parameters. Settings like, for example, height and the number of sides. Now, if a setting has a number off to its right, it means it hasn't been animated and the current value for that setting is listed. So for an example, our tube has 35 sides and has a height of 40. Just below that, open up the entry for 01 default. This is the material that's been assigned to the tube. What you see are all the settings on the tube's material that can be animated. Looking a little closer, you'll see that we have keyframes for both the ambient and diffuse tracks on the tube's material. Now, with the current way of displaying, showing every single animatable parameter on the tube, things are a little cluttered within the window. So we can focus on only the items that have been actually keyed. Let's make a quick change. The dope sheet has its own toolbar. On the far left side, third button in, click on Filters. This will allow us to filter or weed out the selections and objects that we don't want. In the upper right-hand corner in the Show Only category, click on Selected Objects. And once you've done that, down at the bottom middle, you can go ahead and click OK. There's also a shorter, easier list to access by simply right-clicking on that same filter icon. Go ahead and do that. In the list that opens, let's also check Animated Tracks Only. Okay, now the reason the tube doesn't show in the list, it must have been somehow deselected when we activated the dope sheet. Let's hit H for the Select by Name command and we'll double-click on the tube entry. There we go. Now we've got something a little more straightforward that we can work with. Why don't we go ahead and see what the dope sheet can actually do? In the keyframe display on the right-hand side of the dialog, you can move individual keys, in essence, changing the timing of what's been animated. As you move the various keys around, you can see the changes being made down on the timeline. The selected key will be in white, and you can see it shifting back and forth. You can also move a set or a series of keys, shifting time on several keys simultaneously. For a multi-key selection, you'll simply want to drag a window around the keys you'd like to select. The dope sheet also allows you to work with entire ranges of keys. To do that, we'll go to the upper left-hand side of the toolbar, clicking on a new icon. The second one in from the far left side is called Edit Ranges. Let's go ahead and activate that. The black lines that you see running across the entries are called range bars. Let's expand the dope sheet so we can see the entire length of our timeline. We can do that hitting the Frame Horizontal Extents command in the lower right-hand side of the dialog. The length of each range bar shows you the starting key and ending key for that given parameter. It doesn't show you the total number of keys that might be on that given setting, but it does allow you to control the entire amount. You can adjust that by grabbing the white box on either end of the line. Again, as you slide things around, take note of what's happening down on the timeline. We can probably better see what that's doing if we go back to Edit Key Mode and turn something off called Modify Subtree. Now, Edit Key Mode was the first mode that we were in, so up in the upper left-hand corner, farthest icon to the left, we'll click on Edit Keys. Now, on the right-hand side of the toolbar, a little icon looks like a white box with three smaller white boxes hanging below it. Let's go ahead and turn that off. The name of the command is Modify Subtree. This gives us the opportunity of manipulating the trackbar while still seeing the total number of keys underneath. Again, we're just looking at various ways that we can control the timing on our tube's animation. If we liked, for an example, the way the tube moved around the screen, but we simply wanted to slow things down, we could grab the position range bar, moving it to the right. The same positional changes on the tube are still happening, they're just happening a little slower. So that's pretty nice. We edited an entire range of movement while maintaining the distance or relationship between all of the keyframes in that range. You can even change specific values in or on any of the keys. Now, once you've done that, go ahead and right-click on the key. The dialog that opens has specific information about the way the tube is scaling. In the top left corner, you see the keyframe number that we're currently on, that number being 1. Below that, under Time, tells you where on the timeline that keyframe is. The X, Y, and Z values tell you how much the tube has been scaled in each of 3 directions at that point in time. Let's go ahead and shorten up the dope sheet left to right. We'll go back to frame 0 where this keyframe is at, and we'll take a look at the tube. The Z value on the scale would control the tube's height. Let's go and adjust that spinner setting, and we'll see the changes that makes directly inside the view. So what you're specifically doing is changing the scale value of the tube at the beginning of the animation. Let's move to the scale's second keyframe, and we'll see how it looks there. And that's going to put us at frame 60, so on the timeline, let's go ahead and get there. When in position, go ahead and experiment now with the X, Y, and Z values for the scale. We've in essence opened the hood on the scale key, being able to make whatever adjustments might be needed. Now you can make those adjustments on any of the keyframe settings. Let's close the scale and we'll open up the first diffuse key. On the first key, at frame 0, the object should be orange. Let's go back and see if that's the case. Let's change that color to pink by simply clicking on the color swatch inside the keyframe dialog. If we now scrub the timeline, we'll see all the other animated colors are still intact, yet we've changed the color specifically at our first frame. Let's try another color change at another key. The third diffuse keyframe is at frame 80. Let's see where the object is there. At this point in time, let's change the object's color from yellow to orange. Scrubbing through the timeline, we again can see the change that we've made. So there you go with a few things about using the dope sheet. Trust me, the longer you're working with the software, the more reasons you're going to find to open that baby up and make the most out of it.